Well boys, the wait is finally over, because Wuthering Waves has just confirmed one of our playable characters for the version 2.5 update, being Phrolova. A lot of people have been excited ever since the launch of the game to get their hands on this character. So I got to wondering what her power set could look like, and that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to be speculating about what I think Phrolova will do. And just like I always do in these speculation videos, first I'm going to have to talk about what I think her attributes and her weapon type are going to be. I think her attribute is insanely clear-cut. If you don't think Phrolova is going to be a Havoc character, I'm sorry, you're just wrong in every single way, shape, or form. Phrolova has always had abilities that had to do with tacit discords and echoes. And as a member of the Fraxidus, it seems only natural that the ones who are trying to create the Lament again would be the ones who are Havoc. Havoc has always been strongly associated with the Phrynodian and Tacit Discords, and considering Phrolova's entire gimmick is turning echoes into Tacit Discord or creating Tacit Discords out of frequencies, to me it just seems wholly obvious that Phrolova is destined to be Havoc. But outside of that, we still have even more evidence, primarily being the Hecate boss fight, which we do have an echo for. And guess what? This echo is also dealing Havoc damage. So let's make it abundantly clear here. Phrolova is going to be a Havoc character, and I will be keeping this assumption throughout the rest of the video. While her weapon type might not be as relevant as the attribute when it comes to speculating what her kit's going to be like, I still like discussing it. And for Phrolova, I'm gonna be honest, I really don't have much of an idea of what her weapon type could be, because we have seen her fight or use her abilities in many different ways. What we have seen the most often is Phrolova dictating the battlefield like a sort of conductor using her flowers. But considering the fact that Hecate attacks with blades, there's honestly a good chance that Phrolova could be either sword or broadblade or, in my opinion, rectifier. I think pistols and gauntlets should be ruled out. Actually no, this is Wuthering Waves, they should never be ruled out. But I still think that one of those three is going to be the most likely. I personally have my bets on sword, because I just think the bladed attacks of Hecate are going to be incorporated into Phrolova's attacks, by having Phrolova either partially or entirely turn into the Hecate. But let's be real, we don't entirely know, this is just me guessing. As I said before though, which weapon type she is not going to be as impactful when it comes to discussing her kit as compared to what her attribute will be, but I'm going to be running with the assumption that Phrolova is going to be a Havoc sword character. The sword part isn't really going to be relevant throughout the rest of the video, but the Havoc part sure is, because if Phrolova does end up being Havoc, let's be honest, there is a 95% chance she is going to end up being a main DPS that uses Cantarella as her best-in-slot sub-DPS. Because Cantarella, ever since her release, has been homeless in the meta. She hasn't really had a reason to exist. But if Phrolova ends up being a Havoc DPS, there is going to be a very high chance that Cantarella finally finds her place in the meta. There's a very high chance that these two are going to at least have some synergy together. Because, after all, Cantarella does have some echo-related mechanics, gaining Concerto energy whenever teammates use echoes, and also having a bunch of her abilities count as echo skill casts. So there's going to be a high chance that Phrolova either also deals in echo damage, or she's going to have most of her kit count as casting an echo skill, so that Cantarella is able to incredibly easily stack up all the Concerto energy she wants. She's already able to max cap it currently, but I believe that Phrolova is just going to make it easier by making you not have to use the actual echoes. And if Phrolova ends up using Cantarella, there's going to be a high chance that Phrolova is going to deal primarily resonant skill damage. High chance? Scratch that, there's essentially a 95% chance. Considering how sure I am that Phrolova and Cantarella are going to synergize, I'm going to be running with the assumption that Phrolova also uses Cantarella as one of her teammates. Because, let's be completely honest here guys, Kuro hates it when a 5-star character is considered bad. And considering that Cantarella released all the way back in 2.2 and still doesn't have a proper team, it's likely getting on Kuro's nerves. Or perhaps they planned this from the very beginning. I think there is a very high chance that Cantarella was designed with Phrolova in mind, but Phrolova ended up being delayed for some reason. It's very unlike Kuro Games to make a sub DPS and not release the main DPS soon after, although I guess it wouldn't be the first time. I do have some concerns for if Phrolova does end up being Cantarella's best in slot teammate, mainly being that Danjin is just the GOAT. Like, there's no easy way to say this. Danjin is an incredible 4-star character, and while her ultra skill buffing might not be as high as that of Cantarella, she also has 20% attack in her S6, a faster rotation, and higher personal damage than Cantarella. So there's a very high chance that, unless Phrolova ends up being an alternative stat scaling character, you really shouldn't pull for Cantarella even if you want to use her with Phrolova, because Cantarella doesn't actually have any supportive qualities when it comes to echo skills. As I said earlier, there's going to be a high chance that Phrolova is going to abuse echo skills, and Cantarella can't actually support them in any way. Rather, echo skills are supporting her. So ultimately, Cantarella isn't able to buff Phrolova's damage by much outside of the outro skill and Midnight Veil. And while Danjin's outro skill is weaker, she still has access to Midnight Veil, so there's a very good chance that Danjin ends up just being incredibly close to Cantarella in terms of performance. But that's enough doom posting for Cantarella, so let's talk about how I think that Phrolova's kit is going to end up working. I already said a bit before that I think that Phrolova is going to end up abusing echo skills, and that she is either going to be turning into the Hecate or using Hecate in her attack string somehow. If I had to hazard a guess, summoning Hecate will most likely end up being a gimmick tied to the Forte circuit, so I can see Phrolova's kit revolving around building up her Forte gauge to summon the Hecate, and then while the Hecate is around, Forte will start draining, and it's Phrolova's job to either command the Hecate to do specific attacks to generate more Forte, or she's going to have a set combo like either Phoebe or Fleur-de-Lis in order to maximize the damage of Hecate. But now let's talk about another possibility, one that I find to be incredibly interesting. What if Phrolova ends up being a main DPS who uses coordinating attacks? Yep, that's a pretty interesting idea, I know, right? And it's based entirely on the existence of the Empyrean Anthem set. I know, boring, but Hecate is the primary forecast on that set. Can you blame me? Hecate seems to be not really intended for anyone specifically right now, primarily being for just any coordinated attack character. And while it is the best in slot on Yinlin, it's technically not intended to be her best echo. That's what the Nightmare Tempest Methys was made for. So in Kuro's sick and twisted mind, they probably want to give Hecate a dedicated user. And who better than Phrolova herself? Phrolova is the one who summoned the Hecate, so let's be honest here, it would only be incredibly fitting if Phrolova ended up using it as her primary echo. And with this comes an affinity towards coordinated attack damage. I said earlier that I think Phrolova could be turning into the Hecate, but another thing that I hadn't considered is Phrolova instead commanding the Hecate to attack, as well as commanding several other types of tacit discords to attack, ultimately serving as more of a conductor rather than a performer herself, which is very in character for her. So technically, would you not say that these tacit discords that she is commanding would be having coordinated attacks alongside Phrolova? You could say that on a technicality. Phrolova being a coordinated attack DPS would also finally give an actual team to Yohu. So while I don't like Yohu as a character, I think it would be very interesting to see her actually have a team. It seems that Kuro Games is trying to phase out the Shorekeeper, because they realize that they made a mistake making these two broken healers, and now they're trying to alter the teams in specific ways to make Shorekeeper less universal. They did it with Cardathea, they're doing it with Brant Chongli Lupa, so what's to say they're not gonna try to do it with Phrolova? We already know that for a Havoc DPS, Cantarella uses the Midnight Veil set, and if Yohu ends up using Rejuvenating Glow, then we're going to have an extra attack buff team-wide because of Phrolova running the Empyrean Anthem. Or there's going to be a new coordinate attack base set, focusing on damage dealing. And then just like with Fleur-de-Lis, the Hecate Echo will retroactively be added to this set. But that's just my opinion. What do you think of Phrolova? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps out a ton. If you have any questions, be sure to check the link in the description to join my Discord. There's a pretty good chance I'll respond to any questions you ask in there. Additionally, if you just want to see more of me as a person, be sure to check out my second channel in the description below. But that'll be all from me. Peace.